Hello and welcome to the 6 Plus show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and the fragments of shattered gods to that 6 plus show. I am your host, Tom. I'm back again, very excited to be here. And I'm joined tonight by one of Nurgle's chosen sons, Lee.
I don't know how to feel about that, but I'll take it.
Lee's not feeling very well. He's powering through for the sake of the show. He is clearly in Nurgle's grip now.
I am.
Brief time playing Death Guard's caught up with you. There had to be a cost in the end.
There always is.
What have you been up to, Lee, other than being unwell?
What have I been doing? Haven't played any games since I think I've been on last time. Have done a bit of painting, bit of assembly. I had the everything but the Chosen from the Eldritch Omens box, so the Forge Fiend, Mauler Fiend, and the new Warpsmith. So I've been putting those together.
Sweet.
The new Warpsmith is fantastic as well.
Is
Such
it?
a cool model. It's weird because it's on an oval base.
So is he like really long?
Well, he's got this kind of cape of like cables that comes off of him. But
Right.
I don't know. Could easily have gone on a 40mm base, I reckon. But no, it's fine. It's all good.
And are these going in the Black Legion?
Yes. Yeah. They'll be making up Black Legion.
Very nice. Very, very nice. Yes, it's a cool box, Eldritch Omens. I didn't really have the budget for it, but it looked very, very cool. And we also are joined, of course, by our dear leader, Chris. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Excellent.
I am not trapped by Nurgle, so all good. All good.
You're
there.
doing all right. Which Chaos God does have you in its claws?
It's got to be Tzeentch, hasn't it? Really.
Got to be Tzeentch, okay.
First to
Well,
Not even
knowledge.
scheming.
Always scheming. I wish it was Slaanesh, but it is.
Everyone wishes it was Slaanesh. Never
Yeah.
is.
Never is. No.
Nice. Cool.
What about
And
you,
have you
Tom?
played
What
any
have you been
games?
doing?
You got anything in the pipeline? Oh,
I have played no games.
no games.
Since the team tournament, and I have finished my plate guard dude / Trajan Valorous / Blade champion for my Custodes.
Oh, yes, that's
He looks
very
amazing. Yeah.
Finished that
badass.
bad boy, and that is it. I did a couple more legs of Harlequins whilst I waited for the base to dry. But other than
Nice.
that, no. It's
Sweet.
so I've got. Obviously, we've got an event coming up this weekend, and then I haven't got anything for a while. So
Yes.
it's kind of a what do I paint next? It's an exciting,
It's an exciting
new,
time.
exciting new horizon. Which of the many,
Gonna
many
buy a night
things-
army, aren't you?
So instead of doing any of those, it'll be something new.
feels that way. It does feel that
Fresh
way.
start fever. It's always
Yeah.
good to start again.
I was thinking Alpha Legion, but then I was also thinking
That'd
Alpha
be
Legion
cool.
are going to be rubbish.
Probably.
Probably. I mean, never buy a Chaos Army in the hope they're going to be
Yeah.
good.
So far, it's felt like every army that had -1 to hit in 8th has been not very good. In ninth.
Exactly. So I'd have to paint them as Alpha Legion and run them as something else.
That'd be very Alpha Legion, to be fair.
That would be
That's
so
true.
Alpha Legion. So awesome. So yeah, but no, I imagine it'll be either try and make a go of the Harlequins or the Grey
Nice.
Knights,
Sweet.
or maybe paint the Silent King and get the Necrons going.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
I think that'd be really interesting because Necrons are very good now, and I hate them. They're
That's
so
true. I
horrible.
could go into any matchup with Tom.
I'll just
hold
shit
it
my
over you.
pants. I'll just shit
Yeah.
my pants because I don't like Necrons at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't like them.
So it'd be good to hold that, but we'll see. It might be Silent King next. Actually, if I buy some more Warplock bronze,
Yeah, you do get through a lot of it.
you get through so.
Oh,
much.
do you have Warplock Bronze on your Quorum? You didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
basically-
really like that as a colour.
Basically, my entire metallic gold scheme on any army I do is Warplock bronze, and then dry brush Balthazar gold, and then slightly less Retributor gold, and then a little bit of Ironbreaker, and then wash it with Agrax. And that's like my entire
I
Cron
don't
thing.
get
That's
it. You
interesting.
dry brush your Necrons.
I do dry brush it. And I even dry brush the blue bits on them. as well.
First guy to ever do that.
Yeah, it's a game changer, guys. It was a game changer. Imagine Edge highlighting Necrons.
Oh, God.
No.
Edge highlighting like a Doomsday arc.
Ugh,
Madness.
horrific.
Madness.
Sweet. Well, I've not been doing much. I've been poring over the book behind me, the Eldari book, which is going to lead us nicely onto our topic for today,
Segue.
which is powerful books. That's what we're
Powerful
talking about,
books.
ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about powerful books and coping with them in life in general. And we thought we'd split this up into 3 segments. We're going to talk about possessing and playing with a powerful army and the ins and outs, do's and don'ts, and what we've found doing that, or what Chris and I have found doing that. I don't think Lee, as we'll discuss, Lee never has. Then we're going to think about what to do in a playing environment that has very powerful books out there, or a meta that has powerful books out there that you yourself don't have, and how to manage and deal with that as a 40k player. And finally, we'll talk about the sort of never-ending codex creep and FAQ and adjustments to the meta, how it's always changing, and how you can respond to that, different options you have in dealing with that. I don't think there's any one way to do any of these things, and I'm sure that will come out in the conversation, but I think we can definitely offer different ideas about how we and others have managed this and dealt with this, and how we can all find our way in it. I think because we've kind of gone through an era of change, haven't we, with Tau, Custodes and Eldar. It's felt like we've kind of been confronted with another turn.
Yeah, we're in wave 2 now, aren't we?
We're in wave 2. That's it. We're in wave 2. Kind of reminds me of that bit in 8th before New Marines came, where some new stuff had come, like GSC and various other things that were all very scary. And so we're going through a middle iteration of powerful books at the moment that's obviously provoked a lot of conversation and controversy and heartache for people all over the place. So.
Heartache.
Plenty of clickbait comes out of this, doesn't it? That's the good stuff.
So much. Yeah, that's it. We're just in it for the clickbait. But I guess before we dive into dealing with powerful books, let's talk about what strong or overpowered armies have you owned in your 40k lifespan. Let's start with you, Lee.
Yeah,
Cool, well done, Lee. Anyway,
I would say I've always had sort of firmly mid-tier armies.
Okay.
I tend to seem to go for really niche armies, so I don't have, what. Typically, in every generation, you're getting sort of the power books. So I'd never had Marines until quite recently with the Black Templars. So they've obviously they go through ebbs and flows. Chaos Space Marines haven't been good since 6th edition, as far as I'm aware. Demons, likewise, I don't know if they've ever been good. I had Death Guard at the start of this edition, and they were good for about a week.
They were good for a week.
And then I would say my best army is still my Thousand Suns, which is, they're sort of at the lower end of the top third, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's maybe just sort of this upper third, but only the dregs of that. So yeah, no real power armies to speak of.
Such a good tier list you've got.
So a lot of the
there.
time, I think it's fair to say that you've been coming at this from the position of someone that's in a meta where there's stuff that is theoretically and conceptually stronger than what you play. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that will pretty well come on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think, it's, in the Dark Knight where they say, the Dark Knight Rises, where they sort of say, you were adopted, but you sort of adopted the darkness, but I was born in it. Yeah. I kind of feel that way, that everyone's complaining about their army not being good. I'm like, sympathy, none. Chris with his admin. Yeah. Oh no, they've been nerfed. Good. Nobody cares.
You're giving it away. Let's talk. Okay, let's go on to Chris. Chris, overpowered armies. What have you had?
Nothing in 8th, I don't think. I was running Bites for a little while. Then I went.
Yeah,
to
that was
GS2.
okay at the time, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. 8th, not really. 9th, it's been
all of them.
It's been Admec Custodes. So I was playing Custodes at the start of 9th, and they weren't overpowered then.
No.
And then I don't really know what I played. I guess I just didn't play a huge amount for Ruin Lockdown and stuff. But yeah, I came out the other side with Admec. And obviously, they were quite strong.
And that was pretty much when we got out, wasn't it? Admec were pretty much emerging when we were actually allowed out to play.
Admec, sorry. And then, obviously, Custodes have also turned out to be quite strong.
They are very, very strong. Very, very strong. Excellent. So you can boast some experience of someone who's had powerful books at various points in the meta more recently. Wonderful. Yeah. I'm more in your boat, I think, than Lee's, because obviously I hadn't played Drukhari for the end of 8th and early 9th, and I think they were always good. End of 8th, they were fine, like solid, very, very competitive, and like most.
I remember them being good early 8th as well. They sort of came out the blocks really well.
I didn't have them then because I played Death Guard and Nurgle Demons for most of 8th, and then a bit of Craft Worlds towards the end. But I was still a very new player, and I was mainly playing Ulthwé, and it wasn't like particularly optimized Eldar. It was fine, but it wasn't like 6 planes, which I think was what was really very good at that point of the meta. So I started on Drukhari end of 8th, where they were good, and they were always good into things like Marines, which means they always have something they can beat up. But then things really escalated, obviously, with the 9th edition Drukhari book, which I think was the first truly busted, overpowered book of the entire edition.
It's funny, I remember when they came out sort of in drabs, and it was actually the Dark Angels book that seemed to get the most flack for a long time.
It got so much hate.
And it was, oh my God, permanent transhuman all the time, Paul. And then all of a sudden, it was just so made, like it was made immediately irrelevant.
Yeah. It was amazing.
Like no other book has done, I don't think. Even to this point, none of the others just wiped out all the ones before it.
It was like this whole meta that had just come through with Death Guard and Dark Angels of like, oh, none of you can kill us. And then Drukhari were like, we can kill you. Kill you very hard. Although, I don't know how Drukhari into Deathwing is now. Me and Paul definitely need to do Drukhari into Deathwing spam and see what happens. But yeah, it did. It was on release, I think, one of the most statistically busted things seen in some time. And that was something I was going to say as well, actually. I think by overpowered and strong books, we do mean statistically demonstrable, right? Evidence clearly are sort of in all the sort of land of 40k statistics and data gathering, books that are clearly very, very strong playing into other books and have a very high win percentage and are in need of balancing and nerfs most of the time. None of the books we're talking about have been left untouched, or will be left untouched. Let's put it that way.
We'll see. Fingers crossed.
And that's the
Let's wildly speculate on that later.
Yeah, currently sat on and finishing painting up my Harlequins, and I'm intrigued to see how that goes.
You got to do it quick.
An event, got to do it quick. I think my instinct is that's going to have to happen quite quickly because they too feel like just a grenade of power, certainly into some matchups, but we'll see how they do as well. Okay, sweet. So that's us. So we're going to launch into discussing what to do, how to manage playing and having a powerful book. And I'll open this up to you guys. What sorts of advice or pointers would you give to someone who's come into possession of a powerful army, has a powerful book? Where do you go? What sorts of things do you need to bear in mind? Do you want to start with Chris, as you have slightly more experience?
So I think the interesting thing is you have to kind of decide what sort of person you are, so to speak. Are you one of those people who wants to be running the most powerful army? In which case you're really going to obviously be able to lean into that, or are you one of those who's mildly miffed when you when your book suddenly becomes good? I'm one of those who becomes mildly miffed, but I still want my army to be strong. I want to be able to compete. But I quite like the thing I loved about 8th was my Necron flying gun line was that it could really do well, but it wasn't a list which lots of people were taking. So the thing I find hardest about having a powerful book, and I've had it with both AdMech and the Custodes now, is just the weight of expectation.
Yes.
You rock up to the table and your opponent inevitably makes some comment or like something about that. And
the sledging starts immediately.
And it does get
you're that guy, are you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're like you always inevitably have to immediately try and explain, well, no, I have been playing this army longer than 2 weeks. You feel like you just have to say that. Because I remember I went to a 2-day with AdMech, the one I won, and I was just getting like multiple comments from people. I remember my final game, someone came up to me and went like, so did you win your final game? Sorry, did you go first in your final game? Yes, I did. Oh, well, I guess you won then. Like, it was just like this. And it can
for
be
the record, though, did you?
I did go first and I did win. But it can be really frustrating because there certainly is this element of like they're taking away any of your player skill there.
Yes.
And you're saying, you're running a good book, you're going to win. And so
Yeah.
then when you lose, it's then like, oh man, this is embarrassing. I must be a bad player. When it's obviously not the case at all.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing you have to do is kind of work out how you're going to manage that expectation and that pressure.
Yeah.
Whenever I go, I know for myself, when I go to an event with the Custodies, or when I had the AdMech and they were at their strongest, I would put myself under pressure. And if I didn't perform according to my expectations, I would be really disappointed. The main one was probably LGT, and I took AdMech. And I went 3-2. And, I can think about those two losses. And one was going up against an extremely good Sisters of Battle player who played in, for Greece team in WTC or whatever. And the other game was a game I went second against an Eldari gunline with Dark Reapers that just went ham and blew away everything, my stuff quite quickly. And I can explain away those results, but from the outside, it looks like, well, yeah, you did very averagely with a very strong book. And if it depends, I guess, how you view things. But for me, that sucks. So when I was at the team tournament, again, I can explain away my 2 defeats, but at the same time, I'm still like, yeah, but you should be winning with the Custodies. And so, yeah, I think that's obviously, there are quite a lot of negatives, I guess is my point. There are quite a lot of negatives. Obviously, at the end of the day, you are just going to automatically win some games because your army is very strong and you're going to have the edge in a lot of matchups. But yeah, there are sort of things which can affect you kind of mentally. And, that extra pressure can make you overthink yourself or the way you're playing the game and all that sort of thing.
No, absolutely. Lee, do you want to come in on that? Any thoughts on this?
Yes, I'm just going to go open the door because the dog's barking at me. She needs to go for a wee.
Sure.
So bear with.
No worries. Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so we'll crack on in the interim because I think that point about pressure is a really interesting one because I think, as you say, I think there's always a culture around the game, wider culture around the game in which people are always broadly aware of what's good and what isn't. And we like to joke and comment and sort of snipe at each other about what's strong and what isn't. We all do this all the time, and most of the time it's coming from quite a good human place, and it's all it's us just blowing off steam about what is fundamentally always an imbalanced game, and I think probably always will be to some extent an imbalanced game. But I think you have to be able to have a sort of thick skin to those kinds of comments. I think certainly in a competitive setting, and this is something I would say is, you have a choice. And if you're going to competitive events and tournaments,
then obviously you're taking the big stuff from why did you care what other
that's
people
the environment for a powerful book and a powerful list, isn't it? And it's likewise, if you're playing casual games with your mates, that might be the time to leave that at home and try something else.
Like the town.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's having choices and making choices. And certainly at an event, you need to be able to just shut out any kind of noise about what you should be doing or about who's winning because of what. Because, as you say, you can lose any game, even with a strong book. It can still absolutely happen, and player skill still massively matters. And the only game that matters at any point is the one in front of you, right? Not however many your book is supposed to be able to win or whatever. So, yeah. So I think managing those pressures, I think it's very normal. I think most players find it a little bit frustrating when their army is perceived as super strong, or when it's got a lot of people jumping onto it to play it, both from a pressure aspect, also from a creative aspect. I think that can be quite hard. It can be quite hard to feel like you're doing anything interesting because the book gets quite relentlessly solved. But the contrast with GSC, for example, where it feels like there's still tons of things I can do with it because it just hasn't been good enough to attract that kind of attention. So there's lots of interesting stuff. Whereas with Harlequins, I'm like, I probably want to run this in the next couple of weeks because then there's going to be nothing new to say about Harlequins because it's going to get poured over really quickly, I think. Yeah. But anyway, Lee, we'll come back to you. What do you think about this?
I think you touched on what I was going to say actually already, which was that just having, I'm speaking not through experience, but through sort of observation. But just having a strong book isn't enough every time, and that's part of the pressure that you were talking about, and part of the player skill as well. But just because you're running the new Custodian doesn't mean you're going to win your games. There's no, you can't take it for granted. You can't assume that your the book itself is just going to sort of do the magic for you. And a good player with a worse army will still absolutely beat a not very good player with a top army. So that's just things like practice are still important. You just can't assume that you're going to roll people based on having the latest and greatest book.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think that's right. And so you don't want to either play with too much confidence or play too casually. Or to sort of treat it like you just need to go through the motions to win a game. You still have to be switched on and making the right decisions at the right times, right?
I played into Kieran's Orcs a few weeks ago. Hi, Kieran. And I was like, we'll just move everything forward to the Custodies because Custodies don't die. And I moved everything forward, and Custodies died. And it was just like that case in point that the Custodies are very strong when they're played in the right way. But if you play them in the wrong way, then they're not strong. And that's the same with, like Admech when they're smashing everyone. Certain builds were smashing everyone.
Yeah.
With certain units. So absolutely you can, still have that top book and not perform by playing it tactically wrong or getting it wrong in this building phase. I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make, right? Because all the data that we actually base army power off is taken from competitive events where you're basing it on the strongest possible list played by the strongest possible players, and so there's a bit of a skew there, and it's definitely possible. I remember this with Chikari because I'd run quite weird Chikari lists at times and quite odd things, and be feeling like this is definitely quite hard work. This doesn't feel like a sort of effortless thing in all matchups, and it's a case of the very optimal way to play. And actually, it took me forever to actually work out what the correct way to use Chikari was. But once that's solved, it's very good. But it's not necessarily intuitive straight away. Not necessarily straightforward. And I think the one thing I found from the other thing I was going to say with our sort of the long summer of Admech and Chikari was, at events, I got to play into people who'd come up with wonderfully horrific and brutal ways to absolutely crush my list. Because that's the other thing. It's not just expectation. You also have a massive target on your head if you're running one of the armies people know, because they've thought about it. People have read into good players, read into strong armies, work out what makes them strong, and then they figure out ways to crush them, right? So I ran into lists. I think it was the Volkite Contemptor was the bane of Chikari's life, and so you'd run into guys like three of them, and like shit, every boat I have is just popping everywhere. So the solutions are more likely to be out there if you're playing something that's well known and has a target on its head, and so you have to be ready for that. And you'll end up at events in particular coming and playing into really tough opponents and tough games, and you don't get to play those games if you shy away from using the book or from using it to its full capacity. Nice. Okay. Well, we'll move to our next section, which is handling the existence of other powerful books, powerful armies out there, and other powerful presences in the meta that might be stronger than your own. Lee, do you want to kick us off on this?
Yeah,
you have the expertise.
I've got a longer section here. So there's a number of things to consider. And it does depend on sort of where you play and who you're playing against regularly. So not every piece of advice is going to be relevant for everybody. The first thing I would say is something that I like to do is to make the experience more enjoyable for myself. Is I know that if I take my Chaos Demons to an event this weekend, it's very unlikely that I'm going to sort of place in the top 5, maybe not even the top half. But that's fine, because what I'm trying to do is establish a system where I'm competing against myself and other people using the same faction. And I think you can get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that. So I'm not necessarily going to win, but I am saying, all right, well, can I be the best Chaos Demons player at this event? Can I be the best Chaos Demons player in the UK? These are the sorts of more realistic goals than trying to sort of set out to win an event.
More realistic goal, best Demon player in the UK.
Well, there's about 3 of them.
Is there about 3 of them at the moment?
I think at the moment, I think there's 3 people that have got 4 events.
Nice.
So yeah, there's not a huge amount.
Gunning for that.
I mean, I'll probably play it for another event and then get tired and do something else. So I'll get to 2, and that will be nowhere near enough. I'm sure the guys who have got scores, they must be doing very well to get the scores they've got in the meta that we're in right now, with Demons not being very good. Yeah. So yeah, I like to play against myself in that sense, and other people playing the same faction, because that is it's an almost level playing field, sort of over an infinite number of games. Unfortunately, you can just run into Custodians and Tau every single time, which at the moment is it's going to be tough. So that's why you have to take your own victories where you can.
That's smart, though. I think that's definitely smart.
It's a way that I've found to make the game more enjoyable for me, when knowing that, I mean, like I say, I bathe in the sort of the mid tier, so there's no point sort of trying to compete in, so it's not going to make any sense.
Yeah.
But that does lead me into my next point, actually, which is that if you are continually playing into these sorts of armies, so the ones I've just mentioned there, Tau, Custodes, and I guess Eldar will probably be the other one that sort of ends up being the bit of, and Harlequins, the Grim Reaper of 40k events, is that if you really want to and you know you're going to be surrounded by it, you can design your list, as you've mentioned there, Tom, to sort of hit them on the head a little bit.
Oh, absolutely, you can.
So, for example, one of the reasons I'm playing a lot of Disciples of Be'lakor lately is for the inbuilt -1 to hit, because that just gives Tau a bad time. Everybody enjoys giving Tau a bad time, so why not me as well? The risk to that is obviously if you're coming into armies that don't care about the skew that you've built. So if I'm saying it doesn't matter if you can't, you can't re-roll your hits against me over 12 inches and your -1 to hit, because I don't care and I'm just going to get in your face and punch you. So if they're not interested in, if that's not how their army functions, then you can open yourself up to losing a game that you otherwise may have been able to win.
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point. And I think that's something I would definitely emphasize. Even from playing all the way through the Drukhari Admech summer, I only hit Admech and Drukhari a relatively small percentage of the time, right? Because there's still a whole universe of players and armies and stuff out there. So even when something is strong, you're not hitting it every time. You're not playing it every game. And as you say, if you over-tailor and over-design specifically for certain factions, what was it I did? I did a whole Wraith thing when Imperial Fists had come out, because I was like, they're not vehicles, so you don't get the extra damage against my Wraith. I never played them. I got destroyed twice by Imperial Fists at a Twisted event. Then went away and came up with this all Wraith Knighty, Wraith Lordy list, and then never played Imperial Fist ever again.
That is the problem. That's the way. We've got this mental. It's very easy to sort of. I mean, Chris and I talk about all the time is that we always think that the armies that we play ourselves will be the ones that we'll always come up against, because we play them into each other a lot. So Chris has played against my Thousand Suns a lot. I've played against Custodes a lot, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm assuming. And in my head, I've got this weird internal bias that every army is Custodes. And Chris is the same way. I need to prepare for mortal wounds because that's all I'm going to see. And the reality isn't that.
No, exactly. And so you don't want to lose sight of just, I think, the basics of playing and writing good lists and being ready to deal with that. But at the same time, as you say, you can gradually learn the techniques and Anyway, Chris, what do you think?
Before we move on, I had one more thing I wanted to raise.
Yeah, sure.
And this actually came up for me at the last event that we played, which was the Twisted event. So I was running my Disciples of Be'lakor then. I won my first 2 games, had every reason to be confident. Going into the third game, because it was only a 1-day event, I had Custodes. And I did exactly the thing that Chris said about at the beginning. I saw Custodes and I was like, for God's sake, I don't want to deal with this. Probably, I feel like I may have sort of started to defeat myself mentally at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like it did influence the decisions that I made. So by either being more negative or not taking the risks that I otherwise would. Just had this weird consequentialism. I was like, well, it doesn't matter what I do actually, because I'm going to lose anyway. And that was, at the time, I felt it, but upon reflection, I've only then realised how much I feel like it switched my sort of decision making off a little bit, because it doesn't matter anyway. And I never really get that, but this was the first time I really noticed it.
You're never beat. That's interesting.
So that was an interesting thing. So I would say, it doesn't matter what you come back against. Don't. If you're going to lose, make it that you were outplayed, or that the opponent's army was just better. Don't let it be that you defeat yourself, which is definitely how it happened in my case.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think defeating yourself is something that players of all levels fall into sometimes. And I think, as you say, the idea that it's an unwinnable game is obviously very, very fertile ground for doing exactly that. So you need to not give in to that until it actually can't. You never know what the caliber and the level of the opponent you're playing is until you've seen how it all plays out. You'll have someone where you're like, oh goodness, you're not using any of that at all. How I thought you were going to use it.
Well,
I'm going to be all right. I think I'll be fine. And so you don't want to sort of go in with too pessimistic an outlook.
Yeah, exactly.
Got the evidence to back it up. Sure thing. No, those are really good points, I think. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I think that last point from Lee was kind of the main one I was thinking of. It's just happened so many times. It's not necessarily the army. And I remember when I played Manny in one of the Twisted events in the final, and it was like, oh, well, we're both playing Admech and he's Manny, so we're going to lose. So and what is interesting is I made some really obvious mistakes, which in reflection I was like, what were you thinking? Obviously, that was going to happen when I did this, and you either just go, oh, I'll just be super aggressive and see if I get lucky, or I'll be super defensive and just accept my fate. And you don't actually analyze the game like you would in any other situation.
Yeah,
and I think
that's really interesting.
And I think it's the same in like with the custodies and all that sort of thing. So I think my best advice is just try and go through the same processes as you would in any other game.
Yeah.
Like, identify your secondaries, and if you know that, I don't know, they're Tau and they're probably going to do a lot of killing, well, what's going to give me the best shot at getting 60 or 70? Work out your outs on trying to maximize your score. Then as you play the game, dice rolls happen, people can have a bad shooting phase, etc. Like, you think the Custodies Tau matchup, if Tau have a bad round 1 or 2 and Custodies then just slam into their lines, then it's
big trouble.
It's big trouble. So I think you've got to try and identify your win conditions and then just play to them, and try and ignore all of the fog of either who you're playing or like what their list can do and how everyone knows it's super powerful. I mean, it's, like when I was playing my AdMech, a lot of people just assumed they were going to get blown away turn 1, and it didn't matter where they deployed or anything, because you were just going to kill stuff. And I remember in the tournament I won in the final, he just basically deployed on the line and said, everyone's told me I just need to go first and I've got a chance. I'm like, well, yeah, but if you go second, you've definitely lost. He went second and he lost like half his army. Whereas actually, if he had played more defensively, and you watch the Art of War guys, and they're super cagey. They don't ever lose a game in turn 1 or 2, unless you're Jack Harpster sticking all 9 bikes in the middle objective with no cover against Tau and saying, Richard Seeger, go on, see if you can kill 9 bikes. You could. Like, you need to don't lose the game early on. Is basically don't commit loads of your pieces. Try and keep that game close. Just really focus on the scoring aspect. Like, think about your primaries. Right, let's just both score 8s. Right, what about my secondaries? Can I nullify theirs? Can I get mine? And sometimes eventually turn 4 or 5 there might be a tipping point, but at least you've made them sweat. At least you've made it a good game. Don't just try and change anything early on. Just try and play to your strengths, really. I think that's probably the best kind of thing. I mean, obviously there, as we've spoken about list building there. So we said about how you can try and tailor your list, but how it can definitely have effects in the negative as well. So I think in terms of the actual game itself, just try and focus on your point scoring outs. And you never know. You can surprise yourself and end up playing one hell of a game and being really proud of the performance you put in.
No, absolutely.
I love that. Let's soundbite that bit.
Yeah. I think that's really, really valid. And I think it's one of these interesting things where, although those games are going to be uphill battles and they're going to be tougher matches, all the experience and muscle memory you build up into those armies at that time will ultimately be useful, right? And you don't get that practice and don't get that experience until you actually start playing into stronger books. And that was something I was going to say. If you're serious about playing competitively, you have to play against stronger armies, and so you want to seek those out, learn what they do. And in early games, playing into stronger books, you're going to be learning most of the time. I think one of the interesting things when Jakari dropped was that all the best players I know slid into my DMs and were like, "Hello, come and bring the elves, and let's see how it goes." And tons of very good players I know smashed me at some stage or another and demonstrated that it could be done. Lee absolutely did. Lee absolutely did. I think at least twice, possibly more. And so it's the case of you don't get those reps, you don't get that experience unless you put yourself in the firing line for it. There's no point hiding away from it unless if you don't want to be a competitive player and you don't want, that's not the level you aspire to. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to seek these things out. But I think if you're interested in getting better, then you do, and then the wheel turns again, right? And that's the exciting bit, because then suddenly these things get changed a bit. There's a bit less of them on the board because of points. They're a little bit less strong because of FAQs. Suddenly it goes a long way. I remember when, having been playing into late 8th Marines for ages, and then they got their new book and they were slightly sort of toned down a bit, and then books I had started coming out. Suddenly it's like you've been running with training weights that you don't have anymore, and you're like, okay, no, I'm good to go, because I've been trying to kill Marines and it's been a lot harder than this for ages, and now I can really kill Marines. And so that's good, and that's when over time all of that hard work does eventually pay off, I think, as well. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Cool. And the other thing was to say was just, most of the time when you're playing against a strong army, you're trying to learn why it is strong. I think so much of the community is obsessed with what is strong, and it isn't always as good at articulating why things are strong and how things are strong. Like in all of the noise about Tau this, Tau that, Custodes, Drukhari this, Drukhari this, actually understanding the challenges they present and what that can tell us about how the game works and how you need to play the game is much more important, I think, than just knowing, oh, this is good, I'm afraid of it.
Yeah.
Sweet, cool, right?
Again, just to lump onto that at the end there, I think what you've seen, particularly with the Tau release, and I can't help but feel it was intentional, is GW sort of creating a little bit of hype on purpose.
Oh, spooking. Yeah, absolutely. So, spooking is on purpose.
Particularly if we take the railgun, the Tau Hammerhead railgun, how many articles did you see about that at the time? About it being a terrifying thing. And now I'm yet to see one sort of do anything for real. So again, it's not to be psyched out by something and assuming it's incredible.
100%.
Because typically data sheets on the road are never good enough to do stuff. It's all about the sort of the way that things interact, as you say, that make them good, which isn't always very apparent. And you only really learn that by playing against it.
No, definitely. And I think that actually harks back to a sort of important background context point that I think players sometimes are guilty of forgetting as well, which is, we're inside essentially just this great big sales bubble, aren't we? That's what this is. That's what sort of short-term power and short-term weakness of different armies. This whole ever-changing landscape is a sales model. It's about trying to sell some things and driving players around, searching for the solutions to this, that, and the other. And you can choose to go with that and follow that, and that's totally valid, and lots of players do that. Or you can also choose to see that for what it is and take your time and wait and play what you like and see it all come back around again. But I think sometimes players sort of have this abstract notion of everything being fair and equal and right in the game, which is just not, doesn't seem to me they're probably playing the wrong game to be finding that.
People, I know, people obviously, and we've mentioned it before, having a balance. And whilst I feel like there's an element that we could achieve more than we currently do, I don't think the game is meant to be balanced. It's not designed to be balanced. That it is, as you say, it's designed as a business model, as a game for miniatures. I mean, remember the inception of Games Workshop was a models company, not a rules writing company. They want to sell models. They don't really care how that's achieved. So I think that any sort of high notion of, but it's not fair, like, it's not. Like that's
it's absolutely not. No, exactly. It's absolutely not. And it's what you do about that rather than whether that will change, I think is the most important thing. Sweet. Okay. Well, let's move to our final consideration, which is coping with this. How do we cope with the general shift and change of landscape, changes in codex power and FAQs and the like? What survival tips have you guys developed? What survival tips can you offer?
Do you want to go first, Tom?
Yeah, I can go first. I can absolutely go first. I think play the armies that you like and play them broadly and also deeply. Collect all of it over time, steadily. Get more and more options in your arsenal.
Just collect all of the armies and all of their models. That's a Tom Lohman approach.
I don't think all the armies, Chris. I don't think all the armies, but I think playing what you like and collecting it on a larger scale and playing it into lots of different situations will make you better than just rushing around trying to have whatever is immediately good. And certainly, I don't know, you may have found this when books have come out in 9th. I've basically had all the stuff I needed already to make that army work because I'd played it because I liked it and I already had stuff. So Drukhari, it's like, I've already got all of this. I need to buy like a raider or two. That's it. Then we're good. And I think that makes it much easier to cope with the up and down of what units are good and what books are good, because you can adapt to other books and you can adapt to changes in your own book much more easily. I think that's one of the important things. I think take time off and out of keeping up with everything as well. Sometimes you can't keep up with everything literally all of the time.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, there's too much. It's literally every couple of weeks new stuff all the time, and it's not reasonable to expect yourself to keep up with that all the time. So sometimes, some players I know have taken breaks of several months from competitive play to just sort of take the head out of it and then put it back into it again later. I think that's completely valid, but lean on and use the advice and support of your teammates, clubmates, people you're in chats with, the whole content creation world. You can get a lot of sort of digested information that way without having to be completely clued up on every single rule yourself.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. Nice. I think that...
Go on.
Yeah, no, you go.
I was going to say I'll jump on at that point because my point sort of goes directly into... I've got a few points, but the first one I wanted to raise really ties in nicely, which is there's never been a better time to be a 40k player in terms of consumption of information, availability of data, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. We're back again.
We have had technical difficulties, and we are back. I don't know where that cut me off, so I'm just going to start again and hope that Chris can edit it together seamlessly.
You're never going to know that we...
No.
Yeah. This confession has meant nothing.
More confession.
What I was going to go on to say is that there's never really been a better time to be a 40k player in terms of the content that's available to you. If you think about all the stats, the 40k stats and everything else that go with that, you've got the hammer of math, you've got all this stuff out there. However, that's a double-edged sword because, as we've mentioned, that's so much information. It is hard to actually absorb all that. But with that in mind, I still think it is a good idea to let others do the legwork for you. If you are not someone who's particularly mathematically inclined, then let Hammer of Math sort of demonstrate how to do it for you. If you don't like looking at statistical manipulations, then don't go to 40k Stat Center. Just listen to the podcasts that give you that information anyway. It distills it into a much more user-friendly way. Yeah. Not everybody out there is a data scientist, and there shouldn't be an expectation that you should just be able to do that. So consume what you want to consume. If you know that you've got some weaknesses that you're not good at, then sort of you can always tailor what you're looking at for that. But yeah, there's just so much out there, which is both great, but also can feel quite oppressive in terms of how much there is. And I guess we're adding to the zeitgeist of that as to congratulations to us.
Adding our own little cloud.
Yeah. And then I had a couple other points on dealing with codex creep, FAQs, and everything else. Is that those things will always change. So go with your heart. Take the army that you love.
Yeah.
Play it to the best of your... I know.
God.
No, but it's true, though.
Play it to the best of your ability, and you'll have a lot more fun than you will just chasing things around in circles. And as 100%. As you said before, if you are someone who wants to chase the best thing, and that's absolutely a perfectly legitimate thing to do if that's for you.
Be ready for that wheel to turn all the time.
Yeah, you will never be able to keep up with it unless you've got professional sort of help, basically, or you're sharing lots of armies between you. Yeah. And then I think that the simplest thing that we could do with all this change is just don't do anything. Like there is absolutely no obligation for you to follow the latest FAQs, to buy all the new books and the new models. If you're having a good time playing with your friends, just keep doing that. Yeah. There's absolutely no obligation. Yes, if you're going to big organized events, and if you listen to this, there's a good chance you might be. But again, there's every chance that you're not, or you want to take a break or something. And there's just do that, and just make sure that whatever you do, this is your hobby time, and you should be enjoying that. Don't let the changing meta dictate how you should spend your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
That's sort of my tips for keeping up with Codex Creep. Don't bother.
Yeah, I think that's totally legit. Chris, what do you reckon?
I'm waiting for the really polarized opposite to this now.
Chase it.
Yeah, no, I think there were just so many issues with trying to chase it and stay up to date. You've got the whole time lag thing, like this has got good, cool, I want to buy that and paint that, and then you're concentrating, and there's that time delay or each time something new has come out. So trying to get ahead of it, I guess, in terms of analyzing it as a player, that can be certainly one way, trying to approach, like get ahead of it. But obviously you have to be quite a good list builder to manage that. So that's really tricky. But I think you just need to make a decision, like how you're where are you getting your satisfaction from?
Yeah.
If you're getting your satisfaction from just going to a tournament and playing to the best of your ability, then you want to, as the guys say, you want to be playing an army you really enjoy, and like building that and developing the list over time, and that is a really satisfying experience. The problem with being someone who wants to keep playing the hot new army is that sometimes those armies don't suit you. And sometimes it's just you're not going to be able to.
Cult.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of 2-3 years ago, I went listening to a podcast as someone was talking about how they played into Genestealer Cult, and they were like, "Oh, these guys are so strong," and the Codex was reasonably due out reasonably soon. So I was like, right, I'm going to buy all the cheap Genestealer Cult, and I'm going to get ahead of the meta. And I'm going to be like...
The irony is that Genescott's really expensive to collect as well.
It's so expensive. Having done similar, it's so expensive.
I was like, I'm going to be the best GSC player around. And GSC came out, and I was just terrible with them. They were awful. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't get the play style, and it just did not suit me. And I ended up playing against Necrons, and I was like, oh, they seem quite fun. They do a bit of everything. And I started randomly collecting Necrons. I did reasonably well with them, even when they weren't that strong. And that was it was, for me, I think it's about trying to find the army that suits your play style the most. And that obviously can vary from person to person, and different people can play in different play styles, and they might try different things to improve those skills. I think that's more of a thing to try and be focused on, and then just increase that play set of skills. So, when I'm playing if I was playing the GSC, that did in theory teach me a set of skills. I don't know what, but it was in theory to teach me something. And there are lots of armies out there, like Stephen Box says, him playing his Horde Harlequin troop list really taught him about the minutiae of the movement and charge phase and all those sorts of things, because you have to be so careful. And it's the same with the Custodes, you have to be super careful with how you play them. And whereas that was always the issue of the Admech, was it just felt you just moved everything slowly forward and then blasted and game over. So I think, I'd say rather than chasing the meta, try and find your your style, and then try and embrace that. I think that can kind of that can go a long way, really, because just actually constantly chasing is it's not really feasible unless you have the world's biggest collection, or you have a very quick and easy ability to build paint models. Like, we're not all Manny. We can't be like, David, build this army in 2 days, bosh, 180 racks, smashed it. We're not all like that. So that would be, I guess, my philosophical approach to it.
No, I like that. I think thinking in terms of, because with the follow your heart thing, that's another version of it, really, isn't it? Because it might just listen to what it is you actually enjoy and the style of games you enjoy, and work out what those are.
I think you've touched on something there that's relevant, Chris, which is this isn't cheap. So don't bankrupt yourself for this, because it's not worth it. If you are if you're desperate to win and you're going to keep buying things that maybe you can't actually afford, things are not cheap right now in the world. And I'm not saying you can't spend money on a hobby, and you should if it brings you enjoyment. But let's just take a moment to sort of be mindful that don't let it. It is. I mean, we use the word plastic crack a lot, but it is addictive.
It's an engine, yeah.
So let's sort of just keep that in mind as well, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you got to be able to step outside of it and think about how sustainable and manageable.
Yeah, and don't keep tagging your friends in Facebook.
Sorry, that's on me, isn't it?
You got one in, one out. You got to sell. As long as you sell one,
that's my methodology.
Yeah, selling my ogres.
I went through just a little anecdote whilst we're here. I went through a little thing in 2019 called Hobby Neutral 19. So everything that if I was to buy something, I wouldn't buy it until I could sell something of equivalent value. I drove these guys nuts. Had spreadsheet and everything.
Agree with this philosophy. Like, you're supposed to be one of us, Lee.
It's the accountant in me.
It really was.
Sound advice. So I think we can rattle through our last two segments and then call it a night. I think that's covered a lot of good ground, and hopefully some useful thoughts for you all out there. And there is no one way to do this, and part of playing 40k is finding out what kind of a player you are and what sort of enjoyment you get from what sorts of games. So just figure that out a bit at a time. Don't beat yourself up along the way. Excellent. So we will do, which segment? We'll do just the tip first, I think. So it's just the tip. Chris alluded to my just the tip earlier on, and it's a very, very simple tip. Sometimes you have a lot more time than you think in a 40k game. It's a 5-turn game. You don't need to score all of the points to win a 40k game in the first turn or the second turn. You can play for the later stage of a game. And a lot of armies out there are not going to simply annihilate you turn 1, turn 2, unless you give them opportunities to do that. So try and practice assessing how much time you have in a game, especially if you go in second. Think about, is there a big final turn swing on score for me to get here if I keep my resources and assets alive, play a sensible game early on, and keep enough stuff in the bank to actually push for that later on.
Yeah.
This is something I have still not mastered at all. I am a very YOLO-y player. I'm very guilty of wanting to get in there. I had a fantastic game against Sisters where I just went screaming in and killed pretty much his entire army that was on the table, turn 1, but it wasn't the stuff on the table that won the game. It was all of the Repentia and well-placed Retributors and other stuff coming in, and he pushed me back very, very effectively to win on the final turn. And that pacing and knowing when you can afford to take your time is a really important part of 40k. It's not always the case. There's armies out there where you have to get going, but I think thinking about, do I have time? Do I need to stick a head out and shoot right now, or can I wait? Do I need to be on those objectives, or can I wait? Really useful skill.
I'm doing this a lot today, but just to further that, one of the things that I see people doing, and I'm very guilty of doing, that thing you said at the beginning, which is trying to score my points on turn 1. Mm-hmm. But sometimes what I'll see myself do it, and I'll see other people do it too, is let's say it's a hold 1, hold 2, hold more mission, but I need to hold all 4 objectives for some reason.
Yeah.
And then massively overextend yourself for literally no reason. Yeah. And I guess the argument is you're trying to hedge, I guess, and sort of being knocked off of a couple, so you're more likely to get the hold more in your turn. But the problem is with that is any army is weaker when it's divided into sort of more sections. So you can pick apart 4 units on 4 objectives much more easily than you could 2 on 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of range and all the other things that contribute to that.
An example like that I had with my couple of practice games with Harlequins was I've been trying Linebreaker with Harlequins. It works really well with Harlequins.
Funny
that. And one of the things I'd been doing to try and score Linebreaker was getting one little bike squad into their deployment zone turn 1 every game. And then I was looking at the scores and thinking, I'm maxing that with 2 units over 4 turns, 2 through 5 every time. So I don't need to do that. That's not something I need to do. That's just me doing it to try and rack up points. But actually, those bites could be biding their time and launching into that deployment zone in turn 2 with other stuff in a way that's going to be more effective and offers me more than just getting them killed early on, flying in to do something. And it's that same as having patience and taking your time. Wonderful. Any thoughts, Chris? Anything to add to that, or are you happy?
I think it's an interesting one. I've got 2 points. Firstly, when one thing I do a lot of, and I find, is I pop a unit out to do some shots, but the reality is those shots aren't contributing in any way. They're a little bit of chip damage, and then boom! Oh, that unit's now dead. Mm-hmm. Excellent. So I think that's something which can. I'm trying to do less and less of. So I'm just trying to maintain my my approach, and I cannot remember my second point. So
I have to make do with one.
It was the better point as well, so that's really upsetting.
Well, you've gone in too early. Shouldn't have
committed to one.
My life.
Didn't conserve your resources, and now you've burned out early.
No, it's not. Sorry, guys. Maybe
that's all right. I'm sure it was profound.
It really was. It was a game changer.
You can edit it back in later if you remember it.
It'll just be me on my own.
Different clothes.
Something different.
Wonderful. All right, so let's shuffle our way to I Fought the Law and the Law won. And today I believe Lee is bringing some lore for us.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring you this one. So you'll have heard me harping on, and I'm sorry to everybody on the podcast and all my friends, about Be'lakor a lot lately. So I thought I'm going to do a little section on Be'lakor. And I will also be taking Be'lakor this weekend, so it just feels like a nice time to sort of bring that together. Obviously, an incredible new model lately as well. I was going to actually bring him downstairs to sort of display mine. Instead, I'm going to rely on Chris's editing skills to bring up a nice picture now. Thanks, Chris. Extra pressure for you there.
It's going to be a Be'lakor with Lee's face on.
So a bit about Be'lakor then. I don't know how you'd actually say it. It's probably got a different name, a demonic name that none of us could say anyway. But the names that we can say are Be'lakor, and it also goes by the Dark Master or the Shadow Lord. Again, I don't know the demon. I didn't even look it up, to be totally honest with you. But it is an army I've been enjoying lately. Remarkable new model. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the mysterious first ever Demon Prince. So Be'lakor is famous for being the first mortal to ever actually ascend to demonhood, and it's the oldest demon prince of them all. What's unique about Be'lakor is it actually carries the favour of all the 4 Chaos Gods. But even in the oldest lore, it doesn't actually mention what he did to achieve their favour, so you can sort of leave it to your imagination.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I assume it's some kind of unquantifiable horror, depravity.
Quite remarkable, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I always like the bit in the Master of Mankind, which is about the Dracnian, the sword of Abaddon. Sort of the first murder, and I always think that Be'lakor must have done something even more extreme than that.
Or he pays for the Netflix, something like that.
That's it. What's interesting is in the lore, all the gods actually were fighting over Be'lakor for a while. It's described as sort of being a prized possession, like a children's toy that they're all fighting over. And the way they were doing that was trying to win his favor by giving their demonic gifts. Actually, they realized what they were doing is that by all 4 of them sort of repeatedly gifting Be'lakor their gifts, he was actually becoming a little bit too powerful for them to be able to control, and was sort of ascending to the point where he could actually challenge them. And sort of just about in time, they've managed to realize that. So what they decided to do, which is a weird unanimous decision for the Chaos Gods to make, is to start actually raising new demon princes, because each demon prince contains a fragment of the power of the god itself. And thereby doing that, actually divided their power amongst all their new followers. And it goes on to say that Be'lakor is diminished, but still remains outright the strongest of all the demon princes. So, I mean, that's clearly reflected on the tabletop now as well.
Oh, he's badass, isn't he? He's so great.
He's so great.
And he's got all the marks, which is fun.
He's got all the marks.
Yeah. So
you get a lot of good strategy news out of that. I haven't gone into how to use Be'lakor. Maybe that'd be another one once I figure it out. So sort of origin story, no one actually knows sort of where Be'lakor came from, how old he is. And it goes on to say in the lore that even the librarians of the Grey Knights can't fathom his true history. And they actually come across a lot of conflicting information, and it's described as impossibly changing fabrications, which I think is a really cool way of describing sort of you go and you see some theories and then you come back to read them again and they've changed. What's really cool is it mentions sort of the old-timiness about it. So you might find pictures of Be'lakor in like human caves, as well as sort of elsewhere in the world. So it sort of goes on lots of different places where you can find it. But what's really interesting is that Be'lakor is known to be the reign. Well, one theory is he reigned over the mortal realms. So if you're familiar with the Warhammer universe, you'll know of the mortal realms. See Age of Sigmar / Warhammer Fantasy, which is interesting to have a model that has lore sort of throughout both worlds.
Yeah.
But yes, it goes on to say that sort of since the dawn of time, Be'lakor would go to a world, consume it in a plague, blood, other horrors, which, if you think about the gods that sort of that would align himself to, i.e. Disease, bloodshed, trickery, all that sort of stuff. And then once the population died out, Be'lakor would have to move on because he could no longer be sustained by the lack of suffering because basically everyone had been wiped out. Which is pretty dark again. So sort of moves across almost like a parasite, I guess, amongst but feeding on the suffering. And when that's all done, then he has to go away. In battle, Be'lakor appears basically formless. So he's, as I said before, described as the Dark Master or the Shadow Lord. He actually comes across sort of in a black smoke type form. Even his weapon is called the Blade of Shadows. which basically, as you read about that, basically says you don't see it. You sort of see a flash, and then whatever was there is now sort of cleaved in twain.
Boom, invulnerable, ignored.
No invulnerable saves to be taken,
invulnerable,
exactly.
and hence hard to hit as well.
Hence hard. So it backs up his -1 to hit and -1 to wound in shooting as well. The sword is rumored to be either a demonic weapon, which I think is quite boring, or the fact that it could be a remnant for Be'lakor's fall from favor of the Chaos Gods. So basically taking it from them as a sort of a parting gift before he was sort of ostracized and the other demon princes came around. And then the last bit that I want to talk about, just very briefly, is Be'lakor is very much an opportunist. So whilst he's undivided to the Chaos Gods now and sort of gets all the benefits, he actually does fight alongside a lot of the different Chaos Legions as well. Notably, the one I want to talk about is he fights alongside Abaddon the Despoiler of the Black Legion. You can see here a little bit of foreshadowing, perhaps, or a sort of a dark mirror, in that Abaddon also has all 4 marks of chaos.
Yeah.
But has notably always refused the gifts that Be'lakor has accepted. So that's why, obviously, Abaddon is sort of, again, the new prized possession they're all looking for. But he actually actively refuses to accept the gifts, whereas obviously Be'lakor was like, yeah, give me them right now.
Mean.
So there is definitely a kind of symmetry there, isn't there? So I think that's really cool. And perhaps why I like both armies, for maybe there's something in that I've got both the models. I love both those models.
Yes, and they're both at the centre of it all, at the centre
exactly.
of God's favour.
I do love any model, I think, that has a real prevalence and relevance. I always think is a lot more interesting, which is why I love Ahriman so much as well. Because so much of the canon goes around these big characters, and they have sort of their place in the universe. I love that. But that's a little bit about Be'lakor for you.
That is super cool. No, I like that a lot, and that all tallies with, obviously, the only thing I really knew that much about him was his rules, and they all make a lot more sense now, having had his background explained.
What's what I love is that he's got that demonic jealousy, so you can't run him in a detachment with another demon prince.
Yes,
he always rerolls hits. He rerolls all hits and wounds against demon princes.
Does he? That's hilarious.
Just always.
So good.
Yeah,
that's so good.
I love it when the rules can reflect something like that. So
it's nice when it's thematic and
an incredible model. And to be honest, I actually quite like the old model as well.
Oh, the model's amazing.
The old one was really cool.
The old one was nice. I mean, the new one is something else.
The new one is just
incomparable.
Just remarkable, isn't it?
I'm going to go on record completely unbiased and say it's the nicest model in 40k.
It's I think probably the coolest thing that's come out in 90, without a doubt.
I think of something nicer.
Yeah. So put that to the audience. Can you suggest something more beautiful than that?
Yeah.
You say Lilith.
I said Lilith. Yeah. She's got cool hair.
She'd probably win in the fight, to be honest with you.
Which Be'lakor doesn't have. So there we are.
I reckon in a one-on-one she'd probably win.
Might drop.
She really wants that invuln, I'll tell you that much. She's in trouble without that. Right, well, thank you very much, Lee. That was fantastic.
No worries.
Nice to do a show that wasn't event focused and gets back to thinking about the ins and outs of the hobby and playing, and a really, really good time. So hopefully technical issues aside, it's all going to come together, and we'll see you all soon to chat through the latest Twisted Dice adventure, which is on the horizon. And we can talk through the ins and outs of that. Feedback. And
spoilers, I'm taking Be'lakor.
Yeah, Disciples of Be'lakor.
Chris, don't get this out until next week.
Disciples of Be'lakor Faction 101 is coming to your screens very soon. It's a promise. Lee's now committed.
I don't even know if I understand it enough.
I find it can be quite a good way of figuring out what you actually do know about something. So.
Okay.
Wonderful. All right. Well, good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Now. It's the end. It's over.